Hello and welcome to another video. As you might notice from my last video, I'm wearing my shirt today and indicating I'm going to do Lithuanian cooking. I will be cooking a dish called, I think, Kugelis, although I may be mispronouncing it, so please don't hold me to the pronunciation. Kugelis is a potato pudding that is, it's a savory potato pudding, typically served either as a side dish or as a main course. And it's basically grated potatoes and milk and eggs and onions and some other good stuff. In researching this, I came across 3 different kinds of recipes. The first was hopelessly Americanized. You can tell that because they use shredded potatoes like you would with hash browns. And when you actually look at the Lithuanian language recipes, they all use machine shredded potatoes. So that's the second group, or the machine grated potatoes, similar to what you would use for the zeppelins in my previous video. The third group looked like it was built around working with a box grater by hand and using the coarse grating section. I'll talk about that a little bit as we go forward on this, but that introduces some interesting complexities also. So the recipe I'm doing today is one that I've kind of triangulated across most of the hand grated and Lithuanian language machine grated potato recipes. And we'll go ahead and try to make it based upon this. Now, one of the concerns when you're working with grated potatoes is them darkening and browning. When we made the zeppelins, we used lemon juice for the vitamin C content to keep that from happening. Typically, people don't worry about it as much with Kugelis because you're not holding the, there's less time involved for things to darken. However, I've made a few tweaks to some of the recipes I've seen in order to reduce the impact of darkening even further. With the zeppelins, you might remember we used lemon juice for the vitamin C content. We don't want to use that here because we're also working with milk, and well, milk and lemon juice don't mix very well. However, we do have another source of vitamin C we will be using, and that is an onion. Onions are surprisingly high in vitamin C, and so I've modified the recipes a little bit in order to maximize the impact of the onions in preventing the potatoes from darkening. So this should be, so pay attention to this. This isn't something I've seen in any of the other recipes, but as far as I can tell, this seems to be helpful in terms of going forward, especially when you're working with a box grater and it may be some time involved in actually getting all the potatoes grated. And now for the ingredients. Like a very large amount of Lithuanian food, potatoes feature very, very heavily in this. In fact, it's basically a potato pudding. We also have onions. We have milk. We have a choice of heavy cream, sour cream. Some recipes I've seen in Lithuanian even use mayonnaise. But the point is you need something with a bit of fat content to fill it out. Some of the American recipes use condensed milk, but I haven't seen any of the Lithuanian recipes using that. Then of course we have eggs. And that makes the primary dish. The toppings can include sour cream, which can also go in as a fat supplement, bacon and onions, and all of these are optional. So we could do it with just sour cream on top, but I'm going to do a bacon, onion, sour cream mixture on the top. Finally, a note on the box grater. We notice again 4 sides, this one for slicing, this one for shredding. We are not going to use this side or this side. Your choice of the coarse or fine shredding section appears to be up to you. There are some important implications to consider, however, and in this video I will be using the fine grating section for a couple of reasons I'll be discussing here. My recommendation is, if you're only making a small amount at once, use the fine grating section. If you are making a lot for, like a big party, you can use the coarse grating section for most of the potato, but finish them off here. The texture is, I think, a little more refined if the potatoes are more finely grated. But the much bigger issue is that I have never managed to grate potatoes on this coarse section without cutting my fingers. So this is pretty easy on your fingers. This is not. So if you use this section, again, my recommendation is grate most of the potato here and then switch to this on the ends so that you don't hurt yourself. So I've taken the onion and I finely chopped it in here. You don't need a bowl this big for this, but it's kind of helpful. And I've done this, all the other recipes start with the potatoes, but in this case, because I'm doing it by hand, there may be more time when I have to wait for the potatoes to be done, and this will help keep them from darkening. So I'm going to add 2 eggs for every 500 grams of potatoes that I will be grating. And I'm going to stir this in. I'm going to add some milk. I think it should be sufficient. And it doesn't need to be as much milk as I'll end up with. We'll talk about correcting that later. But this is mostly there for the onion to start to infuse the rest of the liquids here. So I'm going to stir this up and then we'll come back to the potatoes. So here we have the onions, eggs, and milk. I have my box grater here and we'll grate everything on this fine grating side. Here I have a sieve over another bowl, and here's where we'll drain the potatoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set things up here so that you can see what I'm doing. I'll come back and I'll show you again how I grate the potatoes. Although you see that already in the Zeppelins video, it's probably worth showing again. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take this side and I'm going to rub it back and forth and twist as I do. The reason to twist is that gives you faster grating, because otherwise what happens is you see these ridges that develop inside will basically slow down your grating. And if it gets too wide, I can just shave off the ends a little bit and then go back. This just takes a minute or two. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just pour this in here. And at this point you have basically a couple of options. The idea is to drain basically some of the juice out. You can let this sit while you go on to the next potato, but if you're worried about it darkening, you can just basically roll it back and forth in your sieve and shake it a little bit, and you'll notice more of the liquid comes out. Do that for just a little bit of time. You can see we have the potato pulp there, and then I'm going to just dump that in here and go ahead and stir it in. So I will do that with the rest of the potatoes, and then I'll come back, grate the pan, and go ahead and get this started. So first I want to show you, there's all this starch at the bottom. So I'm going to pour off this water here, and I'm going to leave the starch. See the starch? And the starch is going to go into the batter and be mixed up. And then I'm going to go ahead and grease this pan. This is like the one thing I'm going to do here that's completely American, is I'm going to go ahead and use this old butter wrapper and basically rub it around the inside of the pan. You can see this part here. Now, greasing pans with butters, I mean, basically you're just taking a small amount of leftover butter here and rubbing it around the inside of the pan so that this doesn't stick. You could also, say, put a little bit of bacon grease on a paper towel. It would work just as well. You could even put vegetable oil in a spray pan. Most of the Lithuanian recipes I've seen just say pour a little bit of oil in the pan and spread it around, but I think this works. This is a little bit easier to make sure you get the desired approach. Finally, I'm going to add a little bit of sour cream here, and maybe a little bit of heavy cream, optional, and then we'll go ahead and get this started. For our final ingredients, I'm going to take a nice big spoonful here of sour cream, and this is entirely optional, but you can add a bit of heavy cream also. I'm going to give it a little bit of added richness, and we're going to stir this together. And you're going to see that this is a similar consistency kind of to like a pancake batter or a light cake batter. But as we cook this, it's going to firm up a bit. So I'm going to pour this into the pan, the greased pan, and then we're going to bake it. And we're going to bake this at about 350 or so Fahrenheit / 170 or so Celsius. Then I'll be back when I'm ready to cook the bacon and onions. While the dish is still in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and cook the bacon. Basically, I have a nice handful here of bacon for the topping, and I'm going to go ahead and let that start to cook. Once it starts to cook, I will add another small onion, so about 100 grams of onion, again fairly finely chopped, and I will cook that for another few minutes. Now, usually when I cook this bacon, what I do is I start it on high, and just as soon as I can hear it sizzle a little bit, I turn it down to medium. The issue here is you don't want to burn the bacon, and bacon needs to cook at a lower temperature. So that's what I do. You can see it sizzling now, so I'm going to start to stir it, and in about 20-30 seconds, I'll start to stir in the onions. So just starting to stir it. Basically, the whole point here is to start to render the fat. And once the fat's starting to render, which it is now, I'm going to start to stir in the onions. Now, as this continues to cook, the fat will continue to render, and it will come out and help cook the onions. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this frequently, and it may be another 4 or 5 minutes. But then this will all be done. So the onions actually took about 6 or 7 minutes. It's fine. Just to show you how they are. I kind of like them kind of nicely cooked here, maybe starting to brown a bit. So that's how long I cooked them for. The potato pudding has now come out of the oven. And you can see it's a bit brown on top. It's been a little over an hour and a half. And normally when they serve this, at least the pictures I've seen show people scooping it out with a spoon. But if you really want it to look nice, the better way to handle it is to treat this like a cake. And what we should do is basically flip this over. Hold on one second. It's a little difficult with a loaf pan. Sorry for that. Bumping the camera there. And then I'm just going to remove this and let this cool a little bit. So we don't really like to use a towel to hold hot dishes for obvious reasons. If the towel's a little wet. But in this case, I'm just trying to get it turned over a little bit. And the primary holding here is with this hot pad. Now, a little bit has scraped off on the bottom here. So I'm just going to take my spatula and remove that and just put it back in place. I'm going to let this just kind of settle for maybe another 30 seconds or so, just to air out, cool down, and then we'll go ahead and cut it. In fact, I can just cut it right now. So if you want a small side dish, you can maybe cut a little bit off like that. If you want more of a main dish, like I'm going to have this for lunch, cut a piece off. And in this case, we want to flip it over so that it's right side up. And we'll top it off with some onions and bacon. And of course, a dab of sour cream. And so here is, I'm not sure quite how to pronounce it, Kugelis, I think, or a potato pudding. This is sometimes considered to be the national dish of Lithuania. So next will be the taste test, and then we'll be done. And now for the taste test. Take a little bit off here, and make sure I get a little bit of bacon, sour cream, all of that. This is a really wonderful flavor combination. You get the this main sort of cake, if you will, is sort of like a really condensed mashed potatoes. And then you get the bacon and the onion and the sour cream on it. Absolutely delicious. Strongly recommend this dish. Enjoy it. Hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Bon appetit.